from Tokyo, my friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope you are all doing very well today. I would like to talk to you about a very nice question that I received from a dear friend of ours. His name is LJLJ, so hello, and he's a really great guy. Very nice, very informative, and very knowledgeable and very enthusiastic. Real friendly guy. He's really great. And he left a nice comment and a question on a video that I did. And he asked me what films did I think were scary. So what films do I think are really scary for me? It's really, really scary films. And it was a really interesting question, so I asked him if I could make a video response, and he kindly agreed, so here I am. Now, I should preface this by saying that I do like horror movies a lot. I'm a real fan of horror movies. And when I was a little kid, I watched a lot of horror movies. I think I was probably much too young to be watching them, but I did. And I think I've mentioned them on this channel before, so I'm a real big fan of, for instance, Halloween 2, Hellraiser 2, the first Hellraiser. I'm a huge fan of Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead. I'm a really big fan of Jaws 2 and Jaws 3, and a little bit of Jaws 4, although not that much, but actually not at all. But and I saw a lot of other horror films that I think I was much too young to see, but for whatever reason, my mom or my dad let me rent them, or they rented them for me. So films like Extra, I saw when I was a kid. Silent Night, Deadly Night, I saw when I was a kid. I don't know why. And that was a really traumatizing film, actually. But David Cronenberg films, the earlier films, Scanners, and The Brood, and Zombie, Lucio Fulci's Zombie, and some other films. And I remember Zombie had that wonderful VHS cover with the very famous zombie, the bald zombie with the teeth and the worms in the eye, and the catchphrase, "We are going to eat you." Classic VHS cover. I'll never forget it. So I watched a lot of horror movies, and I was thrilled by a lot of them. And they were, I think almost all of them were ones where I would be hiding behind the couch, or I'd be putting my fingers in my ears and closing my eyes and just waiting for the scary bits to pass and that sort of thing. So that would be such a fun time, and I enjoyed myself to bits. So, and also Sleepaway Camp, right? I saw the film Sleepaway Camp when I was young. Wow, what a film indeed. That reminds me, one of these days I should talk about the film Sleepaway Camp, but let's leave that for another day. But anyway, the question then is, what films do I think are scary? Scary. Now, I think scary is something that is fundamentally frightening, something that is really raw and just gut-wrenchingly frightening. There are a number of films that I think come close, and some of them, there are other films also, I should say, that I think are generally regarded as being really scary horror films, but for me do not necessarily, for whatever reason, I don't think of them as scary films, and I'll give you a couple examples. So here are some caveats, so to speak. So for instance, don't get me wrong, I love the film The Shining. I think The Shining is a really, it's a harrowing, mesmerizing film, quite dizzying, and very shocking, and it makes me jump sometimes, and there's creepiness to it, but I never thought of it as a really scary film. You know, I never thought of the film as a really, really frightening film. For a number of reasons. Nothing negative or nothing to the film's detriment, I would say. I think they're all very positive, but I never thought of it as a scary film. But again, that's not to say that I don't like the film, or that's not to take anything away from what I think is a brilliant experience that is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. But I never thought of it as a scary film. Okay. The same is true for the film The Exorcist. I never thought of The Exorcist as a really scary movie. I thought it was a very deeply disturbing movie, and I thought it was a very harrowing drama that was set against this wonderful metaphor of a fight over the soul of a young child, the battle between good and evil, so to speak. And this is, I think, ultimately having a lot to do with parents and children, and the idea of adolescence and puberty, and everything that is unknown and harrowing about that experience. And so I think a lot of it is very, it touches on a lot of raw nerves, The Exorcist. And I love the film, don't get me wrong, but I never thought of it as really scary. I never thought of it as really scary. I thought it was suspenseful, it's harrowing, it's very dramatic, but scary was not was not a word that I usually use for me personally when I thought about the film The Exorcist. So, okay, so with that out of the way, and again, also I should say that I was born in 1979, so perhaps my sensibilities might be a little bit different than yours. So I grew up in the 80s, and as some of you may know already, for most of that time I was in the United States, or I was in London. So the films that were available in the United States or London at the time, of course, formed a lot of my sensibilities growing up. So that had a lot to do with what I think is a really scary film. So what are some examples of films that I think are really scary? But I think, for instance, and I won't give any spoilers or anything like that. I'll just be very brief in my description, so please don't worry. For instance, I always found the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to be absolutely frightening. And very scary. And I also found the film, oh gosh, why am I blanking on the title? Exorcist 3, excuse me. The film The Exorcist 3 is one that I found to be very scary. There are certain moments in particular in that film, and if you've seen the film, I think you know what I'm talking about. And there's a particular thing involving a hallway that that's a pretty scary one. But those are, I would say, honorable mention scary films. There is one film that I think is so scary. And when I say one film, it's not really the entire film, because the film is not a horror film necessarily, and it's not a film that's designed to scare. So please don't get me wrong, but there is a moment or two in the film that I'm about to name that I think is it's one of the scariest things I've ever seen. And I saw it when I was a little kid, and it never left me. It never left me, and I've never been the same since. I think it's a great film. It's one of my favorite films, actually. One of these days, perhaps I'd like to talk about it. But this film is so scary to me that I refuse to own a copy of it on DVD or Blu-ray. I refuse, because it's too scary for me to own. Whenever I see it, I'll always just rent it or something, because there's still a video rental or DVD rental store near where I live. So, but to own the film is a little bit too much for me. I think I've been too traumatized by the film to want to own it. So I don't own a copy of this film. And I do watch it occasionally by rental, but that's about it. So, and I still love the film, don't get me wrong, but it is very, very scary from my point of view. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I saw it when I was very young, maybe when I was 4 or 5 or so. The film is Superman 3. Superman 3. Superman 3, Christopher Reeve, and Richard Pryor. And it also stars Annie Ross. Yes, Annie Ross. So Superman 3 is one of the scariest films that I've ever seen, because there is, and again, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but well, okay, let me do this. I'm going to talk about a particular scene in the film Superman 3 in a moment. So if you have not seen the film Superman 3, please turn off this video, and if you're so inclined, you can watch Superman 3 right now, and when you finish watching Superman 3, you can come back at any time, and we can talk about the film Superman 3. So yeah, so again, I just don't want to spoil it for you, lest if you haven't seen the film. So I'm going to be talking about spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the film Superman 3 is one of the, it's probably one of the scariest films I've ever seen, because of the scene involving Annie Ross and the robot. The scene where Annie Ross turns into a robot is one of the most frightening scenes I've ever seen in my life. I saw this when I was a little kid, and the screams of Annie Ross as she's being sucked into the machine, and the music, and she's being wrapped around in this like tape or something, tapes, and sparks are flying, and no one can help her. She's being trapped, and then all of a sudden her screams are like that, and then she turns into a robot before our very eyes, and it's that creepy reverse photography effect. So it has that weird unnatural stillness to it, and her eyes blinks, and the way the things attach themselves to her skin, and her eyes, when she opens her eyes, and her hair becomes all frazzled, and she becomes this robot zombie. That was one of the scariest moments I've ever had as a kid growing up, or a little kid watching a film. And to this day, I cannot stand watching that scene. Actually, it's one of the scariest things I've ever seen, and I refuse to own a copy of that on DVD, because I'm just, as I say, I love the film, but every time that scene comes up, I can't take it. I just can't take it anymore. So I usually just maybe quietly turn down the volume, or I'll just look away for whatever it is. It doesn't last very long. It's about maybe a minute or 2 minutes or so, and then everything's back to normal. So I'll tend to wait until she has that little battle with Superman, and he deflects the beams with his hand, and he goes like that, and she's flung into some kind of little hole in the wall, in the ground or something. So after that's done, then I'm okay with the film. But Superman 3, when Annie Ross turns into a robot, or as George Lucas might say, robot. I love Annie Ross. I have some of her albums. I think she's awesome. She's sexy. She's one of the great jazz singers. She's so cool. Right? My analyst told me, right? So it's all these things about Annie Ross that I love. She's in some great films, The Player, Shortcuts. She's got a great voice. She's rich and funny. And even in Superman 3, she's got a great attitude. She's funny. She's the butt of many jokes in that film, but she takes it very well. And she is, Annie Ross is one of the coolest jazz singers ever. And So I love Annie Ross, don't get me wrong, right? But that scene in Superman 3 when she turns into a robot is frightening, absolutely frightening. And so for my money, the movie Superman 3 is it's one of the scariest films I've ever seen. Because of that one moment, and it lasts for, as I said, a minute or 2 minutes tops. So it doesn't last for very long, and the rest of the film isn't. It's pretty harmless, actually. I mean, there are some really nice set pieces there, and that's that great scene with Clark Kent versus Superman, and all that stuff with Smallville and. I really like that stuff, and I like the exploration of the Clark Kent character. I thought it was really lovely, and the relationship that he has with Lana, I thought was really lovely as well. So, and Christopher Reeve does a magnificent job portraying that sensitivity of Clark Kent and the eagerness and the real almost desperation to want to be accepted as Clark Kent. So it's a lovely performance, and there's a lot going on. And of course, Gus Gorman, Richard Pryor is just fantastic. I think he steals every scene that he's in, and it's remarkable. The scene where he's on skis and he's got the little blanket for or the tablecloth for a cape, and he flies off the building, and he should have died, but he just lands on and he's alive. So it's an amazing thing. He's almost Superman himself, the way he survived that jump. I don't quite know exactly how that happened, but there's some great themes with him as well, right? What is he like? But right, both keys at the same time. Really, it's amazing. Yeah, that's a great film. I really love that film so much. Superman 3, one of my favorite films. But the scene where she turns into a robot is one of the scariest things I've ever seen, and it's because of that I think I will never be able to own that on DVD. That's a little bit of a paradoxical approach. I appreciate. I say that I love the film, but at the same time, I say I refuse to get it. But who knows? Maybe one day when I summon up the courage, perhaps I'll be brave enough to overcome my admittedly shallow based fear of this scene. But in the meantime. What can I say? Anyway, so LJ, I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry if what I say isn't necessarily to your liking. I hope it is, but anyway, that's my just sort of honest take as to what I think is a scary movie. So I don't know. I think for everyone, the answer is very different, and as I like to say, that's one of the great things about cinema, is it allows us to be very individualized and very personal, and everyone has a different reaction to a film. And so I'd love to hear what you have to say about what you think are some of the scary films in your life, and if you have any comments about that, or if you want to share what those scary films are, I'd love to hear about them in the comment section below. I think it's a very interesting exercise. But if you want to leave a comment like that below, please do so, and I'd be very happy to respond to the best of my ability. So, okay, so LJ, thank you very much for your great comment and question as always. I look forward to talking with you again. And as for the rest of you, please keep your questions coming and your comments. They are really the lifeblood of this channel, I think. Without you and your wonderful input as always, I think this channel it wouldn't be as fun as I think it is. It really is a lot of fun for me. So I want to thank you very much for making it fun and exciting and giving me a lot of feedback and inspiration. You are the ones who are inspiring me every day. And so I have nothing but thanks and gratitude for you and your just great enthusiasm for all things cinema. My friends, thank you very much, and until we meet again, cheers.